Christ. Amen.
Thank you for that. Dr. Ivanna, I'll leave this time to you. You can introduce yourself and go on.
Thank you, Malcolm. I appreciate that. So my name is Ivanna Symons. I'm a medical doctor from South Africa. Um, just making sure you guys can hear me, right?
Yes,
Loud
we
and
can
clear.
hear you.
Thanks. I am here with my husband, David. Um, I got married about 2 years ago, and just briefly about myself, I would say my biggest passion in life, and especially in my career, is to bring God into what I'm doing, and especially also to merge the health message with the medical work. That is something I'm particularly passionate about. I'm learning a lot about it myself at this point still, but I really believe that we can get amazing results by doing that, and that is something that I'm unbelievably passionate about. I'm currently completing my practical years. In South Africa, we have 6 years of study and then we have 3 years of practical years after. I'm still busy with my practical years, completing them. And after that, I'm not yet quite sure what I will be going into or if I will be specializing or not. God is still going to show me what He wants me to do. But currently, I'm still completing my practical years. So I think we can start with the presentation. Just want to share my screen. Um, okay. So, I before we get into, so what Malcolm asked me to talk about is basically practical tips on how we can, um, sorry, practical tips on how we can evangelize and share the gospel while still maintaining professionalism. And I think that that's a very, very important topic, and it's definitely very important for us to know that. But before I get into the practical tips, I would just like to kind of set the background. I believe that if our hearts are right and if our perspective is correct in terms of um, what God has given us, the commission God has given us, and what God's idea is of being a doctor and what that entails, if we have that correct understanding, all of these things will fall into place very, very well and very easily with us without us really having to like try that hard. So I very just quickly want to say one of the best books I believe anyone can read when it comes to bringing the gospel into our work as doctors and understanding what the commission is that God gave us as doctors, which is a very specific commission and a really amazing job. I believe one of the best jobs in the world, the best job in the world, is Ministry of Healing. That book has absolutely changed my life. It is so beautiful and it really encapsulates so much, but especially the earlier chapters. I would say chapter 6 to chapter 9, chapter 10, for doctors specifically. I would really urge everyone to read that. A lot of the quotes I'm going to be using in this presentation is directly from that. These ideas are not mine, they're not unique. I did not think of these things. These are literally just things that Ellen White wrote and that we all have the privilege of reading. And I actually, yeah, I can't explain them as well as she explained them in the book. And for you guys, for everyone, just to get like a deeper and a more thorough um, understanding of all of these concepts, I would really just urge everyone to go read that. Okay, so just starting, I just want to highlight my core points, the things that I really want everyone to understand from this presentation. So the first point I kind of alluded to already. I I believe that it is not that we have this job as a doctor and that we now have to find ways to bring the evangelism and bring the gospel into our job. The two are actually one. Physical healing and the gospel and evangelizing cannot be separated. They are one. And I think I will elaborate quite a bit on this. You'll have a better understanding of what exactly I mean. The second point is that God is our ultimate authority. In the medical field, we have a lot of mentors, we have other physicians, we have professors, we have people we look up to, people who are teaching us, but ultimately God has to be our ultimate and our highest authority. The third point is that God's commission for us as doctors is significantly more of what the world's expectation is of doctors. We get taught only the one side of the two sides of what is expected of us from God. We get taught the sciences, we get taught medicine, we get taught physical examination, we get taught all of these very good things that is very necessary for us to know. But the aspect that is missing, that the world does not teach us, and that these universities and our mentors and teachers do not teach us, is the spiritual side, which is arguably, if you don't have that side of the coin with two sides, you're missing the point. And then fourthly, we are going to be focusing on practical ways. I'm going to be talking a lot about some practical tips, some things I do, some things that I've seen work really well. Okay, so just briefly, part one, the reason behind what we do. So this is a quote from Ministry of Healing. I'm just going to read it and then we'll discuss it. So this can be found on page 111 and it's paragraph 2. Christ is the true head of the medical profession, the chief physician. He is at the side of every God-fearing practitioner who works to relieve human suffering. While the physician uses nature's remedies for physical disease, he should point his patients to him who can relieve the maladies of both the soul and the body. That which the physician can only aid in doing, Christ accomplishes. They endeavor to assist nature's work of healing, but Christ himself is the healer. The physician seeks to preserve life, but Christ imparts life. So I think that is beautiful because oftentimes, no, every time when we talk about disease and we talk about healing and we talk about ways of bringing the patient relief of their suffering and getting them back to their normal healthy state, no doctor ever, no senior or professor or teacher has ever highlighted the fact that Christ is the one that's healing. Behind every physician that's seeking to preserve life, Christ imparts life. Christ is the healer. What we're only trying to do, Christ actually accomplishes. And these concepts cannot be separated. Onto the next slide. This is basically just saying the same point again. The Savior in his miracles revealed the power that is continually at work on man's behalf to sustain and to heal him. Through the agencies of nature, God is working day by day, hour by hour, moment by moment, to keep us alive, to build us up and to restore us. When any part of the body sustains injury, a healing process is at once begun. Nature's agencies are set at work to restore soundness. But the power working through these agencies is the power of God. All life-giving power is from him. When one recovers from disease, it is God who restores him. Yeah, so that just illustrates the same point. And it is just a beautiful concept. What I just also want to focus on quickly, the slide before, the very first sentence, Christ is the true head of the medical profession, the chief physician. So we need to have the correct perspective when we think about our jobs. I know I didn't go into a lot of detail now, but I think these quotes both really illustrate perfectly well that there's a focus that we need to keep when we are in this line of work, and that the health system is set up in a way it removes religion altogether, and for a good reason, because there are so many different religions. When they set up these protocols and they set up, they write these textbooks, they trying to educate people what to do. They can't choose one religion above all others and say that this is the way we're going to do it. They've removed it completely, and they have built this system that's built on protocol and steps, which is good. But unfortunately for us who do have this information, who have these books, who know Christ's mission, who know how Christ did it, and now who also knows what God is expecting of us, we can't separate the two. We cannot separate what we know from science and disease from God being behind healing and God being the head of the medical profession. So it is difficult for us to keep this perspective sometimes because the medical schools are not going to teach us how to think this way. It is a perspective that we have to keep by ourselves and that we have to learn how to have in the first place. So 2 points I really just want us to focus on from what I've read is that God is the chief physician. He's supposed to be our ultimate authority. We are going to go through med school. There might be things we don't agree with. There might be things, some of us who are doctors, I know for me, as soon as I left med school, that more and more I realized for myself that there are actually a lot of things that I didn't quite agree with, and that you kind of have to find your own way in terms of like, are you going to choose to do this for patients? Are you not? And ultimately, at the end of the day, God has to be your ultimate authority. Yeah, and then just the final point there on the slide that I just want to illustrate again is we cannot separate God from what we are working with. We are doctors. We are future doctors. We work with disease. We work with healing, and God is the one who heals. whenever anyone gets healed from anything, whenever anyone gets better from anything, it's because God is choosing to make that person better. And we cannot remove him from the topic of disease. Okay, so just part B to part one. I just quickly want to talk about Christ's ministry and how that pertains to our mission today. So again, another quote of Ministry of Healing. In the ministry of healing, the physician is to be a co-worker with Christ. The Savior ministered to both the soul and the body. The gospel which he taught was a message of spiritual life and of physical restoration. Deliverance from sin and the healing of disease were linked together. The same ministry is committed to the Christian physician. He is to unite with Christ in relieving both the physical and spiritual needs of his fellow men. He is to be to the sick a messenger of mercy, bringing to them a remedy for the diseased body and the sin-sick soul. Yeah, so this is just talking about Christ's ministry and then applying it to us today, physicians of today, doctors of today, that with what the work that we are doing, the same ministry that Christ had is committed to us, and that deliverance of sin and the healing of disease are completely linked together. So when it comes to sharing the gospel and when it comes to also addressing the emotional problems of patients and addressing the spiritual problems that patients have, these are all part of treating a patient. Okay, and then I'll just briefly go through this, but this is basically just talking about Luke in the Bible. And how Luke and Paul work together. So I'll send my slides to Malcolm, and then he can distribute to whoever wants it, and then you guys can like go through this nicely. But I'm just going to browse through this quite quickly. Luke was called the beloved physician by Paul in Colossians 4. And I just want to read a quote also from Ministry of Healing, that's basically just talking about his work and how his work, basically what Ellen White was saying in Ministry of Healing is that the type of work he did and the way he did it, we also have to do today. So he continued to labor for several years, both as a physician and as a teacher of the gospel. In his work as a physician, he ministered to the sick and then prayed for the healing power of God to rest upon the afflicted ones. Thus the way was open for the gospel message. Luke's success as a physician gained for him many opportunities for preaching Christ among the heathen. It is the divine plan that we shall work as the disciples worked. Physical healing is bound up with the gospel commission. In the work of the gospel, teaching and healing are never to be separated. Yeah, so I think this is again saying the same point. But what I like about this quote very much is it is actually quite a little bit of a practical illustration of how Luke did it. You know, he did his work as a physician. He worked as a doctor. He did what he did. He ministered to the sick, but then he also prayed for the healing power of God to rest upon the afflicted ones. And just that little act alone can transform our entire practice as a doctor and bring God into it and literally transform what we are doing to also be an opening for the gospel message. Okay, so this is basically just going to be talking about what we said so far. I have mentioned all of these points, so we can move on. I do just quickly want to read this one last quote of Ministry of Healing, which I think that we have as doctors, those of us who are on a Zoom meeting who are doctors already, and even those of you who are medical students still and have had some practical experience in the hospitals, especially if you're quite advanced with your studies, we really have one of the best jobs in the world. I know my husband will disagree. He thinks he has the best job in the world. He's a preacher and also a missionary, but I think that we have the best job in the world. And the reason I say that is because we are blessed with probably the best possible circumstances in the world to evangelize. We are going to come across people who we would otherwise never have met. You know, I'm working in a hospital now. I recently just moved like across the country, and it was a very last minute thing, and I got a new job in a different hospital, and I would never otherwise have met these people. And I've had such amazing opportunities to evangelize and to tell him about Christ. And there are people that are so hungry, and no one else would have. I don't know if any other doctor saw them, if they would have evangelized the way God was leading me to, because that's just honestly not something that I see a lot. And I would not have met these people if I was not here in this position. And also, on top of that, we instantly have their trust, we instantly have their respect from like 99% of the population. People really trust doctors. You can honestly tell them anything and they will follow what you are saying. They are very open. And then on top of that, people are hungry, they are searching, they are in vulnerable positions where they are sick or their loved ones have just passed away, or they themselves are recently diagnosed with a terminal illness and they are seeking for something. They are so open. So not only do we have a great responsibility, we also have these amazing opportunities. And I just can't think of anything that is more beautiful than working with Christ so closely in reaching these people. So with that being said, I just quickly want to read this quote. Um, Into the medical missionary work should be brought a deep yearning for souls. To the physician equal with the gospel minister is committed the highest trust ever committed to man. Whether he realizes it or not, every physician is entrusted with a cure for souls. So I do want us to realize that there is quite a lot of seriousness connected to the job that we chose. And we might not have known that it is this serious and that these things are bound together and that it cannot be separated. But it is such an honor and it is really a beautiful, amazing job. So yeah, let's move on. I also just quickly want to mention, basically on the same point that no one will ever really teach us these things. We are not going to go to med school and they're going to tell us how to evangelize. They are not going to tell us that, this is what God's ideal is for you. This is what God means when he says, God's beloved physician when referring to Luke. No one is going to teach you what exactly it entails. And I really just want to urge everyone to educate themselves, to read, to surround yourself with people who are like-minded. I do have a few suggestions on the slide, some books you can read. I would really also suggest that everyone has a very deep understanding of the gospel and of Christ's ministry. That is what this is based on, is Christ's ministry. And we also have to have a deep understanding and a deep personal experience with the gospel to be able to share this. That is really essential to this job. And then I also really want to urge everyone to have mentors who understand this commission and who are living it out themselves. Because without that, it's going to be difficult for us to grow if we don't have people that we can look up to, people who we can ask for advice, people who have gone through the same things, who are struggling to kind of decipher for themselves. What does it mean to be an Adventist and to be a doctor at the same time? What does it mean to have this great commission as a doctor? And then also to have a like-minded community of either medical students or doctors or both, where you can surround yourself with people who have the same values as you, and you can keep each other faithful, you can keep each other to encourage each other to keep growing and keep learning and teach each other things as you discover yourself. I really think that applying these things would really be of great help. Okay, and then this is just a beautiful quote that I found also in Ministry Healing, and I just want to read this because this is, this really just brings out how God is going to be the one to teach you. So, if the physician faithfully and diligently strives to make himself efficient in his profession, if he consecrates himself to the service of Christ and takes time to search his own heart, he will understand how to grasp the mysteries of his sacred calling. He may so discipline and educate himself that all within the sphere of his influence will see the excellence of the education and wisdom gained by the one who is connected with God of wisdom and power. So God is going to be the one who will help us to grasp the mysteries and the sacred of this sacred calling. I know that for me, when I started learning about these things, it was very difficult for me to really understand how I can merge the two very practically. At times I felt like I was compromising. At times I felt like I shouldn't have gone back to the medical field, and I should maybe have just gone into a different line of work because it's so difficult. There was times where I just felt like it was so difficult to do this fully and faithfully without being called to compromise because of the way things work and because religion has been so removed from the medical system. I don't know if it's maybe a little bit different in Zimbabwe, but in South Africa, there really isn't a lot of time for that unless you make time. Unless you are the one to bring it in, it is not going to be there. So you guys can just read this quote for ourselves. I just really want to spend a little bit of time just briefly talking about a small part of my testimony. So there was a time where I took a gap year, but just before this, one of the reasons I took the gap year was because I had this kind of like identity crisis, I guess you could call it, where I was learning a lot of these things that I'm talking about now. And like I said, I really felt like I needed some time to think about if I should go back or not, because I really didn't want, the last thing I wanted to do was compromise on my beliefs. And I had felt like at the time that it was really difficult for me to really fully live out my convictions and to really do what I need to do while being a student still, and not having like a lot of my own say, and where I can like say how much time I'm going to spend on what, and I get to be like the one to talk to patients alone. As a student, you're often just like shadowing your teachers, and you just have to do what they ask you to do, and you don't have a lot of your own control. And so I did take some time off to figure all that stuff out. But the year before that, I had made a decision to really learn about this and to set time aside to educate myself, because I didn't even know of any other Adventist doctors who were really like taking this seriously. There are definitely many, and now I know many, but at the time I didn't. And I didn't have anyone to ask, I didn't have anyone to look up to, and I just had to find out for myself, what does it mean that the gospel and physical healing is bound up to one? What does it mean? These like extreme expectations that are set before us. Exactly does it mean? And I spent a lot of time to read books and try to find people and contact people and ask people questions. And I really like, instead of going through my studies, I know at the time I was doing anesthesiology and surgery, and it was actually like a long period, maybe 2 or 3 months, and I was just reading my Bible, and I was studying Elamite books, and I was doing my own research on these things. And I didn't think that I was going to be taking that long to do it. But before I would start studying, I would sit down at my desk and I would pray and I would ask God to guide me, because I knew that I really wanted to learn more about what He wanted me to do. And I would really feel impressed, rather not to study anesthesiology right now, and to rather not study surgery right now, but to read one of these books that I was busy going through and what I was busy studying. And day after day after day, I was being impressed to go through these books, to study these materials, to study on the history of the health message, to just study all these things. And I did not have a lot of time to study anesthesiology. I was honestly just following God as He was moving on my heart to learn more about these things. And it came to the day of the tests for these things, where I had to like actually write I don't remember, the first year was an anesthesiology test. And I hadn't studied anesthesiology, and I had about 3 hours before the test. I had also really started to keep the health message very seriously before, like around that same time. And I decided I'm not going to pull an all-nighter. I'm not going to do any of this. I'm just going to sleep well. I'm going to eat. I'm going to exercise, and then I'm going to study. So I had about 3 hours left, which is not a long time to study like a couple thick textbooks. And I prayed and I played with God to help me, because I want to stay in medical school if He wanted me to stay. And I didn't have the time to study. So I decided I was going to just do my best and ask for His guidance. And I started studying. I didn't even really know where to start. But as I started, these topics came to my mind, one after the other. And I just grabbed a pen and I just wrote them all down. And in my 3 hours of studying, I was just focusing on these topics. And I didn't actually get through all the topics. I think I had about maybe 7 or so topics left. But every single topic was in the test, almost exactly in the way it came to my mind. And I got a distinction that day. And I only studied for 3 hours. Of like a month and a half's work, I only studied for 3 hours. And that was amazing. And I mean, I do also want to say that later in time, all this was repeated. This work was repeated. So I did have a very good opportunity to relearn what I like missed out on. It's not like that information was lost on me, thank God. But in that during that month and a half, and exactly the same thing happened with surgery. So during that time, I really had a very, very beautiful opportunity to learn what I believe God really needed me to know about what He wanted of me as well. Not just clinical excellence, not just being proficient in physiology and disease and knowing all these different disciplines, but also knowing what God wants of me. God inspired a prophet to write several different books with a lot of beautiful information on what He's expecting of us. And I had never taken the time to study that. And God gave me that opportunity in the middle of med school when I was trying and supposed to be studying other things. He gave me the opportunity to do that faithfully. And he also very faithfully helped me not to fail, contrary actually. And he really took very, very good care of me. The same thing happened with surgery. Surgery was one of our most extreme and most difficult blocks and or subjects. And I didn't have, yeah, we had these oral presentations, which I'm sure most med schools have. And they had probably like, I don't know, 190 or 200 and so topics that they could ask us about. And they ask you in depth. They absolutely grill you from left to right. And I really, really did not know these topics well enough to go into this exam. I had a broad knowledge of them, but did not know them well enough. Again, every day when I had to study, I would pray and I would ask God to help me to know what does He want me to do. And every time He impressed me to rather focus on completing the extracurricular studies I was doing on Alan White's books and the history of the health work and counsels on diets and foods and all these things. And I showed up to that exam and I managed, I also had only a couple hours before the exam and I asked God to show me which one topic to study. And I studied one topic and they asked me one topic and I also got a distinction. They asked me the only topic that I had time to study out of 200 and something topics they could have asked. And it was really just amazing. And I really have so many other miracles. I just don't have time to share them all. But yeah, basically the point that I'm trying to make is that um, I'm urging you guys to quote unquote educate yourselves on what God's expectation is of a doctor. And I can promise you that He will take care of you in whatever season you're in, whatever other work you have going on. Ask God to show you what He wants you to know. Ask Him to guide you because He will bring you the right people, He will bring you the right resources, He will bring you everything that you need to know to get an adequate and thorough understanding of what He is expecting of you. At the end of the day, that is way more important than what med school is expecting. And even if it requires something like failure or, not getting the cum laude that everyone wants or passing with honors or whatever, it still is very, very much worth it and it's worth more than anything to know that you are doing what God is expecting of you to do. So yeah, anyways, preaching over, I want us to move on to some practical examples. Sorry, I'm just really cold. Sorry, it's coming winter here and I'm getting quite cold. Okay, so let's move on to some practical examples. I really had a lot of fun creating this PowerPoint and thinking about what to share. I really have so many stories, so I'm hoping that we also do get to sharing some. Actually, looks like we're doing good with time. I'm hoping that I also do get to sharing some testimonies of some amazing encounters I've had with patients and of ways that these practical examples of ways that you can minister have really brought amazing people into my life and yeah, just some good stories I had to tell. Okay, so very briefly, I almost want to skip this, but when we talk about the bringing the gospel into our medical work as a doctor, we do have to just be at least broadly aware of the legalities of this. So I've just outlined here, and it is broadly the same in most countries in the world, but including Zimbabwe, definitely I did my research. So we just have some laws that it's not in any way illegal to talk about God. It's not in any way illegal to evangelize or share the gospel or ask your patients about the Lord at all. But we do have some constraints, some frameworks that we have to work within. And the reason we want to do this is because we do not want to go against the law. Even in the Bible, Christ urges us to stay within the law unless He is asking us to do something different. Unless they clash, we have to take Christ's authority as supreme. But as far as possible, we have to live peaceably with everyone around us, and that includes the law. So, yeah, these laws and things that I'm mentioning here, obviously they're based on South Africa, so you guys don't have to read them too much, but it's just based on privacy, equality, autonomy, informed consent, those types of things, professional boundaries, and I just wanted to mention them. But practically, let's just quickly go through a few red lines or things we want to avoid. So we obviously don't want to coerce or pressure a patient into accepting our religious views or practices. If someone is saying no, if someone is saying that they're an atheist, the Christian thing to do and also the legal thing to do is to back off and to still do your absolute best in treating them. Let your behavior win them. Still do your absolute best. Do not discriminate in any way because they're saying no, but never pressure anyone to have to listen to what you are saying. Obviously, we want everyone to hear what we are saying, but not everyone is open, and then that is not our place. And then obviously we do not want to discriminate care, so we never want to say no, you can't get access to care, or we change our decision making based on if they're Christian or not, or based on if they're accepting what we are saying or not. Obviously, so and then we also don't want to avoid or delay or alter any treatment that is indicated for the patient because of religious reasons. We obviously also don't want to violate the privacy or confidentiality of a patient by discussing their views or what they believe or don't believe with anyone else. And we also definitely do not want to blur any professional boundaries. And what I mean by that is we are still doctors. We can never try and use our consultation rooms or the doctor-patient relationship as a way to evangelize only, and then we don't take care of the physical needs the way we need to. We need to strike a very good balance at doing both. And we need to make sure that we always do our jobs. So bringing Christ and the gospel into what we are doing and obeying Christ as our ultimate authority does not mean that we have to in any way neglect the job that we have in front of us to do. Okay, so practical tips of what we want to do. So unless the patient actually initiates it, I think it's always a good thing to ask permission, to ask them, would you like me to pray for you? Are you okay if we talk about this religious topic, whatever it is? Are you okay if I, explain my view of how Christ is the healer of all disease? And because I think it would really help you to know this, to know how much he cares about you, to know that he's right by your side, to know that he is actually the one who accomplishes what I am trying to help you with. And then the second thing is, it's always very good to try and link spiritual conversations to medical care. I'm sharing the gospel with you because I believe that this is something that is good for our emotional state. It is good to have a God, and that God is the one that's healing us. God is the one that is going to take care of you. God is the one that is really going to heal you at the end of the day. And if you understand this and if you trust in him, you yourself will handle all of this better. Or when you link it to, a a conversation that you're having with a loved one who's with a patient's loved one who just passed, of a loved one of a patient who just passed on, and you talk to them about, you give them hope, you ask them, are you a Christian? And then you share with them the hope that they have of seeing their loved one again in heaven one day. And then you urge them to live a life that's right with God, to live out the gospel, to accept God, and to live rightly so that they will see their loved one again. That is very appropriate, but link it to medical care. And then obviously time and place, very important. Lengthy discussions, there are definitely places for that, but don't do it when there's time constraints. Don't do it when patients are under pressure. Don't do it when a patient is in need of pain relief or medication or something, and are you delaying that because you want to have this lengthy conversation? Time and place is very important. And then something I do like to do, and I think that this just adds to the professional element of it, is to document what you spoke about. Obviously not in detail, but you can say, like with anything, like you would say, patient was counseled extensively on weight loss because of the good benefits that it will have on their disease, hypertension or diabetes, whatever they're struggling with. In the same way, you can say patient was counseled on having a relationship with God as someone they can trust in because they're a Christian, as a means of supporting them emotionally, or patient was counseled on finding a church community with people they can trust in, confide in, and to have that social support that they desperately need. Just document what you were saying. The doctor after you might also be a Christian. They might continue that conversation. The patient may have continuous help on that in that aspect. That not if you're not there, because I know with us, every time the patient sees a different doctor. So you can't always continue the conversations that you're having with them on the one day. The next time that you see them, it's a different, or the next time they come, it's a completely different doctor. So I think that's always just like a good idea, just to keep that professionalism. And then obviously equal treatment. So you should be able to show that your decisions that you're making is not at all based on their religious stance, like what they believe or what they've accepted or not accepted of what you have said, did not end up with them being treated any differently. Okay, so now let's get into the actual practical tips. So first of all, prayer. I almost don't have to say this, but I really did want to make it like a specific point. At the end of the day, our success is going to depend on how involved God is with us, how involved the Holy Spirit is in working with that patient, how much God is leading us in what we are saying, when we are saying it, how we are saying it. And if we do not pray, we will definitely not have nearly as much success. It is literally going to be the catalyst in our success. So it is very good to pray quite specifically and extensively. So what I mean by specifically is there are so many different things we can do for every patient. There are really so many ways of evangelizing. There are so many practical things I can actually give and can say. But at the end of the day, God is the only one that knows what is going to work for who. And we can't give all advice to every single patient we meet. You know, we only have limited time. We have a limited opportunity with every person we come across. And we need to know what to say to who, which avenue to use. With some people, the health message is going to be amazing. That's going to be exactly what they need. With other people, you need to get them to an Adventist church or any church for that matter, just so that they can have community. For someone else, if you just pray with them and if you share the love of God, that's enough. Someone needs literature, someone else just needs a Bible verse, someone else just needs your example. That person might be a complete atheist and they don't even want you to mention the word God, but your example and your way of living and the way that you treat them is enough. So which avenue we use for which patient is going to be very directly linked to how successful we are, and only God can know what he wants us to do. And then obviously we also want our eyes, we want to be used by God as much as possible. So you really want to pray that God opens your eyes to see as many opportunities as possible. Sometimes we might actually think that someone is closed, but if we pay enough attention, if God guides us as much as he really wants to guide us, we might see that someone is actually not that closed off and that there was an opportunity that we almost missed. And then we also want to understand when someone is actually closed off. Sometimes sharing too much or sharing with the wrong person, when they're definitely very closed off and they do not want to hear what we are saying, might actually close them off more and might actually do more damage. Or it can waste our time that we spent with someone who really does not want to hear, does not want to know, that we could have spent with someone else who really is very open. So it is very important to also have that discernment. Okay, so this is a very important part, is that we want to indirectly let our patients know that we are Christians. If we can have them start the conversation, we've already done like 50% of the work. They've already done like 50% of the work, because now they start the conversation. So now there's a lot less of that professionalism, minor legality issues, because the patient has started the conversation. So nothing is being forced on anyone. They clearly want to talk about this. And now you have the liberty to kind of direct to where this can go. You can bring in the points that God wants you to bring in, and you can emphasize what this patient already believes in. So, number one, we want our conduct to speak for themselves. We need to act like Christians. And this is not something that can be forced. This really is something that needs to come from inside. So number one is clinical excellence. We always want to do a very good job as a doctor. We want to be thorough. We want to be good. We want to pick up on everything we want to pick up. And like medically, we want to treat our patients very well. And that just comes from God guiding us, but also like being good students, being focused on what we are doing, and having a lot of experience that just comes with time. And then obviously we want integrity, not just with patients, but with colleagues also. I don't know about the other doctors on this platform, but I know that sometimes I get asked to do some unethical things by my colleagues, not inherently sinful things, but not necessarily with a lot of integrity. And we do not want to be examples only to our patients, but we also want to evangelize to our colleagues. There's a lot of people out there who are searching. There's a lot of doctors out there who are searching. There's a lot of people around us who do not know the message that we know and do not have the message that we have. So that is very important. And then I think in this one is this third point is in particular very important to me. This is something that I struggle with a lot sometimes, is being joyful, friendly, and unhurried in a high stress environment. I know with the amount of workload we have in South Africa, and we are very understaffed in most hospitals. There's a significant problem with not having enough doctors working in the hospitals in South Africa. So we're all doing like 3 or 4 doctors' jobs, and we are severely overworked. And yeah, it's a very stressful environment, regardless of which specialty you're working in, regardless of what you're doing. It is very, very stressful and very fast and fast-paced and hurried and rushed. And if you can be that one doctor who clearly is not stressed out like all the others, where there's something different about you, there's something joyful, there's something peaceful, there's something so unbelievably lovely and compassionate about you, where you can slow down, you can be present with your patients, you do not rush them, you do not miss things, and you really take care of them properly and well, that really speaks volumes. It speaks volumes. And then kind of tying in onto that same point is being compassionate beyond duty. Sometimes we can do our job and we can do our job well, but if Christ was beside us, he might have expected of us to do a little bit more, to be compassionate beyond what just our job description entails. And that is open for interpretation. Sometimes you can only do that much, but sometimes God might expect of you and ask you to do something more. And that might really be what that patient needs that day. It's not going to be the same for everyone. It's not going to look the same every day. But being compassionate beyond what is expected of us in the system shows that we have something different. It shows that there's something about us that is not like the other doctors, that is not like the other students, because we have nothing to gain from being there longer. For example, we have nothing to gain from praying with a patient. We have nothing to gain from giving someone a Bible. Whatever God is impressing on your heart, whatever that means to show more compassion beyond duty. Um, we do not have something to gain for that. And that speaks volumes to whoever is watching. And then moving on to the next point. So what I like to do in the hospitals, this depends on the setting that you're in, but if I'm like working in the clinic, for example, and I have my office, and I like to have like a little Bible on my desk, and I also have like little Bible verse cards that the patients can take. And I have little tracts where it's like different informations, like devotional tracts or whatever, things about health, things about God's love, whatever. And sometimes these things spark conversation without me even having to mention that I'm a Christian. They see the Bible and they say, "Oh, is that your Bible?" And then, "Oh, I'm also a Christian. This is my favorite verse," or, "Oh, I actually have the same Bible," or whatever, wherever their minds want to take the conversation. But this token that is clearly linked to Christianity is already starting the conversation without me having to say anything, without me having crossed any boundary, without me having done anything so far. It is very clearly showing them that I am a Christian. So I really like to have stuff like this on my table, not only just for them to look to see it and to start the conversation, but also for them to take. So I actually have quite a few things. I've run out of a lot of my materials. I need to stock up again, but also for them to take. And it really, really helps. You're sending them away with something that, especially if there's like ways to contact the church, churches to get involved with whatever, they will have a link to somehow get to the Adventist church or any church for that matter. But obviously we want them to come to our church. And they have that link without you even having to say that you're an Adventist. So there's also ways of directly asking them. And this is something I do with literally every single patient. Sorry, the prayer. Okay, so the pray, let me just go to the second point quickly because I just want to, no, this is not at all what I was talking about. Okay, let me talk about this first. Sorry, I thought I was making a different point on this slide. So asking to pray with a patient, sometimes you can just start the consultation off and just say, like, listen, I want to pray with you. Is it okay if I just pray? I'm a Christian and I like to start my consultations by praying every time because I want God's guidance. But initially this was what I was doing, but sometimes you get a lot of backlash because patients are atheists or they're Hindus, and Hindus, especially in the place where I'm staying right now, we have a lot of Indian people and they are, majority of them are either Hindus or Muslims or yeah, definitely not Christians. And the Hindus especially take quite offense if you are trying to practice any Christianity with them in your vicinity, or if they feel like you are trying to reach them. They really don't like that. With Hindus, you have to really go very careful. You have to be very careful when you share about this stuff because they don't like to feel like they're a project to you, like you just want to reach them. That's for some reason they just really don't like that. So with them, you have to be very careful. So initially, I did that. I did just tell everyone, I'm a Christian. I believe that God um, is the greatest doctor out there. You know, he created the human body, and I really would like to start this consultation just by praying with you because I want him to guide me, because I want to do the best thing possibly for you. And you know, you do get very, very good responses when you say that, and they're Christians and they're open to that. You get great responses, and immediately they have a lot of respect and they really like what you're doing, but it's not always like that. So generally the praying with a patient works better if you know that they're already open with this. But again, follow God's guidance, because sometimes he might lead you to do that and then it will be good. Sometimes he might not. But it is a good thing to start your consultations by letting the patients know that you are a Christian and this is how you like to do things. I think that is a beautiful thing if they accept it. Sometimes, like in the length of a consultation later down the line, you can also just, you can, especially if you've just diagnosed them with something, you can always say, like, hey, do you mind if I pray with you about, for this specific disease or emotional challenge or whatever the thing is that you guys were talking about in the consultation? Do you mind if I just pray with you about this? Because I believe that, I can give all the advice in the world. You can do everything from your side, but ultimately we need God to help us. We need him to guide us. He can give us so much strength and so much peace and guidance and direction with what you are facing. And I really would just like to pray with you. Is that okay? And again, the responses from the patients are amazing. They really, really appreciate when you do that. And then obviously praying before a surgery or major decision, people, for the same reasons that I've said, really, really appreciate that. And then the last one, which is something that I'm very passionate about, is praying with patients when they know that they're going to die. Either if you've diagnosed them with a terminal illness or they've already been diagnosed with a terminal illness in the past, and this happens a lot, and since I started working as a doctor, you see this more and more. I didn't come across this very much as a student, but it is honestly one of the most humbling experiences that I've had, is praying with a patient when they're close to dying. So obviously you can't ever tell, like, it's going to be this long and then someone that they are dying. They are very open. This is the most open I've ever seen people in my life. And again, it's strangers, it's people you would never have met in your life, opportunities you would not ever have had. And if you were not the doctor in that room or in that hospital knowing that this patient is going to die, you would not have had this opportunity. And then in that moment, you can pray with them and you can ask them, are you open that I can share the gospel with you? I really would love it to share, about Christ's love, because I love him so much and he's done so much for me. And I would love it if you can experience this. And to be honest, like, I want you to have eternal life and I want to see you one day. I want to see you healthy. I want to see you well. Can I share this with you? And I've never had anyone say no. They want that. They are so open, regardless of their background, regardless of what they believe. People are scared. They are searching for things. When they're lying on that deathbed, the barriers are broken down. There's no more resistance. There might be people who are still not open, but personally, I have not come across any single patient ever saying no to me doing that with them. And yeah, it's absolutely amazing. Okay, the second point of directly telling your patients or letting them know that you're a Christian is, in our consultations, in our dealings with the disease, to bring the concept in that Christ is the chief physician, that he is basically Christ's role of healing and disease, and how the gospel ties in with that. It is really a beautiful thing when you can when you can, like, try and express to patients how the gospel can help them their emotional state, their trust in God, the suffering that they're experiencing. It is a beautiful thing when you can share with patients that in the aspect and in the light of their disease. Um, and it is very important to link this with care, with their care, like with their medical care, because it's not just that we want a platform to evangelize and patients pick up on that. It is important to link that. But with what we know in Ministry of Healing and with what I've read earlier, it's not difficult for us to link that. God has given us literally the words to use, and it is really a beautiful thing. So I really, again, want to urge everyone to please, please, please go read Ministry of Healing. It is one of the best resources you can have to equip yourself to do these types of things. Okay, I think, okay, this is what I thought I was talking about earlier. So when we are working with patients, there's also things that we can, behavior that we can read from them, cues that we can watch for, to see if they're a Christian or not, because now what we want to determine is if they're open or not. So indirectly, we can, I know something that helps me a lot is on our hospital, the patient files at the top right left corner, they literally write the religion down. I don't know who started that or why they're doing it, but it's the most useful thing because I can immediately see it. Are they Hindus? Are they Muslims? Are they atheists? Are they Christians? What do they believe in? And obviously Christian doesn't mean active Christian, doesn't mean Adventist, doesn't, there's still a lot that could be included in the word Christian, but already I have a lot more information. That really helps. So I don't even have to ask them, but I know this is a Hindu, I only have very limited options of like approaches I could possibly take. Or they're Christians, they might be very open. This is amazing. I could probably start the conversation by praying with them. So that really helps. What you can also do is you could ask the patient you could directly ask the patient I usually include this in my social history, like when I ask the patient, do you have support? Do you have, like, how are you doing emotionally? What is your community look like? All those types of questions together. Can't you just in there, you throw in the faith question. Do you have a religion that you believe in? Do you have a God that you believe in? Is there someone like that, some deity, some power that you believe in that you can like unload your burdens on, that gives you strength, that you can trust? Like, is there something like that in your life? And what do you believe in? And then they can openly tell, I'm a Christian, I believe in God. No, I'm an Adventist, or no, I'm an atheist. I do not believe in anything like that. I feel like it's a crutch, and please don't even talk to me about that. Then you know exactly not to go there. And then your example will have to be enough. And then you silently pray that God gives you the opportunity to somehow be a witness to this person. So it directly asking them in that way, but not to evangelize. To the patient, you are asking them for the means of their care. You're asking them because you want to incorporate that into their care. And even if we weren't Christians, this is how we were taught to do it. In med school, I've never heard anyone do it in practical life, though. But in med school, we were taught to get this information from the patient as well, because we need to get a thorough understanding of what exactly it is, like what this patient's life is like, what their emotional support, what their faith, all of these things, how that affects their disease, because it all works together. In practicality, we don't always have time for that, but as a Christian, use that as a way to find out if they're open or not. And then also, I didn't mention this, but you could also really tune into listening to and searching for the way patients talk. I call it like faith flags. You really, really watch and pray that they would use words that would tell you if they're open or not. But clearly, if they say things like, I've been praying about this, or my health is in God's hands, that patient's open. You could immediately go in a lot more directly than you would with other people who don't say that, because for a fact they're open. And that really helps. But it does take prayer, and it does take, you really have to like tune in, because it's not always this obvious as like them saying, I've been praying about it, or it's in God's hands. Sometimes it's quite subtle, and you really want to ask God to help you see these types of things so that you will be able to be quite specific on how you handle it with every different patient. And then this is something I really love to do as well, is to have resources on me. So like I said earlier, on my table, when I'm working in the clinic, seeing the patients, the stuff is everywhere so that they can see that I am a Christian, and hopefully they'll start the conversation. But something I really also like to do I just quickly want to kind of change the layout because okay, can you guys see me? I just want to show you something. This is better. Okay, I'm not sure if you guys can see me or can you only see the slide?
We can see both you and the slide. Slide
Oh,
is sort
great.
of behind you.
Oh, I see. Okay, great. So I just want to, I don't know if you guys can see this. You don't have to be able to read what's on it, but it's just like a little card. There's two versions of this, but this is like a laminated card that I've like printed out. And this is just a written out card with like a Bible verse at the top, and then I wrote down the verse down here. And this is kind of a slightly bigger version of the same thing. But something I absolutely love to do is to have these like little Bible verses that I write these out myself. So there's a lot of verses in the Bible, obviously, that talks about the sick, that talks about God loving us, that talks about emotional support, whatever the topic is that you want to get, whatever the topic is that you want to reach someone with. There is definitely several different Bible verses about this. And I like to print these out or write these out whenever I have time for. And to really in the mornings take a couple with me. I usually have a bunch in my bag, a bunch in my car, a bunch there at the hospital. And then I really pray and I ask God to show me, if there's a patient that really needs something like this. Because sometimes I work in the ward, sometimes I work in the clinics, depending on what you're doing, depending on where you're working. You have very different range of opportunities. And especially as a student as well, we didn't really see a lot of patients like one-on-one alone. So it's not necessarily an option for people to have these things like on their desks by themselves. But I mean, you guys could take them with you, put them in your pockets, and then, after you've interacted with a patient, you've examined them, you've learned from a patient, you take a couple of these and you ask them, do you mind if I just, especially if you know something about the patient, and you can give them a couple, whatever God is impressing on your heart to do. You never know what a verse like this can do without you even having to say anything. I recently had a patient who had her third suicide attempt by hanging, which is obviously um, a miracle that failed, because time was very limited for someone to find her. Luckily, they did. And I had a beautiful opportunity to witness to her and to tell her about God's love. And I mean, it's her third attempt. She's been in our hospital three. It's the first time I met her, but she's been in our hospital three times. Three times they've tried to help her, twice before they've tried to help her, clearly unsuccessfully because she's back. Something that they're doing isn't working. And I had the opportunity to share Christ with her. And I brought several of these with me. And that morning, and even outside her room, when God really impressed me to go in and to spend some time with her and pray with her, I prayed that God would guide me on which ones to use. And I had specific ones with me. And I chose a few based off of, I guess, an impression. And I shared it with her. And afterwards, she was just sharing with me how she felt like God wrote these verses in the Bible to her. She felt like every single one of these verses that I shared was literally from God's mouth to her, like only for her, meant for her heart, with her situation, with what's going on with her. And it was just so unbelievably specific with like how God was just using these little cards that I decided to make and share with people as He guides me to, and how specific it was to her situation. It was really absolutely beautiful. So yeah, I have quite a few suggestions. So in the same way with the Bible verses, we can also just place little devotional tracts in the waiting rooms, prayer rooms, wherever. Our hospital does have a few prayer rooms. And then, yeah, like I said, on your desk, um, free spiritual material. I also do have, currently I don't have, but um, a couple like Bible study packs where it's just like it can be prophecy, it can be on the Gospels, it can be even some topics on um, what we believe as Adventists, whatever God is impressing you on sharing, but having different varieties is good. And then when impressed upon you to share these with patients as like additional material, because a lot of them are like, I really love Bible verses that you shared with me, but I don't really know how to study my Bible and I want to know more about this. And then if I have something like that, I can share it with them. You still maintain professionalism, but you also do achieve what God is expecting of you to do. Because we have to remember that the way that the system is built, the way that the hospitals and the medical system is built, does not take into account for religion. And at the end of the day, we really have to understand that sometimes what God is asking us has to surpass what the hospital is expecting of us. And fortunately for us, it's not illegal to share these things. It's just sometimes a little bit difficult to still maintain the professional boundaries between you and patients and not to like kind of merge it into a friendship, which still isn't wrong. That's still not illegal. It's just that most doctors prefer to not have those boundaries blurred. But sometimes God might call you to just go a little bit above and beyond for a patient, and then it might be a little bit more difficult um, to truly understand, like, yeah, understand properly how to just maintain those boundaries in a healthy way still. Not that that's a problem, but I'm just kind of saying that it does take a little bit of discernment and prayer. And then also you can, depending on the situation, you might even be able to give them an extra Bible verse also, or a pack of Bible studies, or a book like Steps to Christ or Desire of Ages, or some beautiful book like that in their discharge paperwork. Like, because we always give patients these packs when we discharge them with like their discharge summaries and whatever happened in the hospital and whatever scans and medical, investigations we did for them, so that they have that those investigations results with them. And then in there, it's so easy just to add like something in there, just add something in there. You don't even have to tell the patient. They can do with that what they will. And it's always really nice to, within that material that you're handing out, if possible, to add something like a website they can go to if they want more information, or I don't know if your churches have websites with Bible studies and, places where they can get more material, places where they can get in contact if they want to contact like a church elder or a church pastor and they want to get involved in some way, they want to know more, somewhere where they can go that preferably isn't you. Because while it can be you, and if God impresses it on your heart for it to be you, and if you're okay with being that person's shepherd or contact person or whatever, that is fine. Not everyone has the time to do that. I know for me in my situation, I, as it stands, I think I have like 200 WhatsApps, and I always do try to help everyone, but I do not have the time to. And if people are going to rely on me to also do that while still doing my job at the hospital and trying to complete my own practical years, things are not going to get done. Something is not going to get done. So it is good to kind of outsource a little bit as well. This ties in with my next topic. Why is this not going? This ties in with our next topic. So something that I actually recently kind of incorporated into my way of doing things is to try and have like a little bit of a referral system to local churches near the hospital to where I work. So like I said, we recently moved, so I do not know the area. I've never lived here in my life. I do not know the people. I don't know the language. I don't know the churches. I don't know anything. Like, we have a Adventist church that we go to, but that's like 45 minutes away from where our hospital is based. And I can't share the patients that I meet to go to our church that's that far away, especially when there's like financial boundaries and other problems like that. It's not always practical. So what I have managed to do is to kind of build like a system of the local churches that are around the hostel. And I have different types of churches. I have Indian churches, I have Zulu churches, I have colored churches, I have whatever different cultural groups and language groups we have, because in South Africa we have so many different, and I'm sure in your country it's the same, it's more or less the same thing. We have so many different cultural systems and, yeah, languages and barriers and things like that. And it's always nice when you have someone in the hostel that you like, you feel a burden that they need a community, they need people around them, people to take care of them, and you really want to share this, whether they decide to go or not, but you really want to share the Adventist church with them, to have them to go somewhere where they will fit in. My challenge with this, however, was that I felt like I couldn't take them to my own personal Adventist church because I didn't want to be the only link between me and the church. As a doctor who treated them, there is an issue as a potential boundary for professionalism. But that wasn't really such a big issue for me. That depends on you. That's up to you to decide. There's no legal issues there. But my biggest problem was that I'm working most weekends. I have so many weekends where I'm either at home sleeping after a 24-hour call on a Sabbath, or I'm actually at the hospital on a Sabbath. So I'm not actually at church that often, unfortunately. So for me to be the one to welcome them and invite them and help them to integrate into the church and make more friends is literally not going to be possible. So what I try to do is have these other churches that are around the area of the hostel and to find a really good contact person. And ideally, the type of person you want to find is someone who is like who has the spiritual gift of shepherding, where that's their passion. They want to take someone under their wing. They want to make them really good friends with them, and they want to make them a part of that church. They're the one who introduces them to everyone. They're the one who sits next to them in church. They're the one who invites them to lunches. They're the one who makes sure they get the Sabbath school quarterly Bible study book. That's their passion. That's their forte. And, when we are trying to reach people, we need to understand and we need to make use of people who have different spiritual gifts to us. And we want to incorporate that quite well. So I would say that this isn't quote unquote like a normal part of a doctor's job. But like I said earlier, sometimes God is going to press on your heart to go above and beyond what is expected of us as doctors. And you need to discern how much you want to do. And at the end of the day, I always want to listen to God more than I listen to like the standards of being a doctor. No one around you, you might not ever find anyone around you that is willing to go as far as you're willing to go for a patient. But I can guarantee you, none of us has ever gone as far for a patient as Christ went for those people that he worked for and he worked with. And that is our example. That is what we're aiming for. So while some of this might sound a little bit extreme and might sound like it's a lot, I can guarantee you that you will really have amazing results and that God is going to really, really work through you. Unfortunately, it looks like our time is almost out. So I'm going to try and finish up. I don't think we're going to have time for stories, unfortunately. But let me just quickly finish up. So lastly, I just want to talk about situations in which we can almost always evangelize. So, like I said earlier, when we address the fear of death directly, especially when we're talking to patients about,
Dr.
sorry,
Yeah, I
sure.
I think you can um, just go on and with your slide. When you're comfortable, you can then go on.
Okay. Okay, sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So especially when you're talking to patients who have a terminal illness or, we've done everything for them that we can and we have nothing more to do and they're just getting sicker and sicker. This is literally one of the most profound gospel opportunities. They are open, they are dying, they are very, very ill, and they are searching. And they are really open. I can promise you that is one of the most beautiful times to evangelize to people. And then also a really beautiful one is I really love to pray with patients after a loved one has passed. Unfortunately, a lot of the time it's my job to share with patients that with family members that the patient has passed on, that their loved one has passed on. And it's a difficult thing to do. And the only way that I have managed not to always leave it on like this really dire, sad, traumatic ending is to bring God into it, is to literally tell them that, ask them, are you Christians? And then if usually they say yes, when they don't, I do have like a little bit of a different ending, but um, yeah, when they say yes, then I get the time and the chance again to tell them about the resurrection and to share with them the hope that we have of seeing them again, and then to urge them to live lives that are ready and that are right with Christ so that we can see them again. And it doesn't take the pain away. It does not at all make the suffering easier, but and they still lose their loved one, but there is beauty in the sadness that they will see them again. And then they also have the motivation to want to see them again, to live lives that are right with Christ. And I think that that's beautiful because that is also a way of sharing the gospel, is to urge people to live lives that are right with God. Yeah, just some important points. We really want to let God guide us specifically in each situation. Sometimes He will ask us to do things that are off script. Sometimes He will, ask us to do things that might seem extreme. And He will also guide us very specifically with each patient to do things a little bit differently because everyone is differently, every situation is differently, every situation is different, every patient needs different things. And for you also to do these things, to be able to share with patients how to be saved because they might have questions. A lot of people have asked me, like, how are you actually saved? You need to know your own stuff. You can speak from your own experience, what has happened in your life, how God has saved you, how you overcome sin, what is faith, all these things patients might have questions about, that you need to be able to answer. And you can only do that if your own connection with God is strong. That's just a point of encouragement to you. And then I just quickly want to, you guys can read this in your own time. Maybe I'll just read one or two. I'll read this one. But these are just really beautiful promises for us as doctors and future doctors of how God will guide us, how God will help us, and things that we can just hold on to. I myself sometimes really need these, and I actually like to print these out as well and keep them with me. Sometimes in the hospitals, things can get really discouraging, and if you can just hold on to these things, that God is with you and that He will guide you and He will help you when it seems difficult to do what He's asking you, and it seems overwhelming because there's so much to do, and now I'm adding more on my own plate because I'm trying to do extra for the Lord as well. It's really nice to just have these to hold on to. Okay, I'm just going to read this one. The others you guys can read. So the Savior is willing to help all who call upon Him for wisdom and clearness of thought. And who needs wisdom and clearness of thought more than does the physician, upon whose decisions so much depends? Let the one who is trying to prolong life look in faith to Christ, who to direct his every movement. The Savior will give him tact and skill in dealing with difficult cases. So I really think that that's beautiful. Regardless of what the difficult case is, we have this promise that God will guide us. He will give us tact and He will give us skill and He will give us wisdom. And who needs that more and clearness of thought more than us? Not only with the exhaustion and the fatigue we have to deal with the late nights and the overwork, but also just with the weight that is resting upon us. So yeah, this is just highlighting again what I said earlier. Maybe let me just tell one story. I think the story will illustrate what I was talking about, like how God will ask you sometimes something different for different patients. So I went to work one day and I was working with one of the teams in the internal medicine department that we just had a bunch of patients come in the night before. So we were on the post-intake team. So we were going through all these patients really fast of like, what are we going to do for each one? And I was part of the group of people that have to carry out all the investigations and whatever. So there wasn't a lot of time. It was like rushed, it was fast. And I looked at this patient and he had a heart attack the night before, but his labs and everything was like not showing a heart attack. His troponins, they were really, really, really high. And initially on the private labs that they brought us, but then the labs that he had, or the blood tests we did in the hospital, they were like super low, like uncarried. They fell so low. It almost looked like these were blood results from two different patients. And clinically, he was fine. The ECG didn't show any ischemic changes. It's almost like that heart attack like reversed itself. It was really incredible. But we were still like investigating if that was even like what happened, or maybe they mixed up his labs results or whatever. But this guy I didn't know anything about him. I didn't even have his files. I didn't know, was he Christian, was he Hindu? I didn't know anything about him, but he was crying. And I just had this, I prayed and I asked God to show me that morning. I obviously had prayed that God would give me opportunities to reach people that day. And I looked at him and I had this impression to pray and to ask God's guidance to what I can do to reach this guy. And I looked at him and I prayed, and these verses came to my mind, and I just like, okay, I don't have time to really talk to him. Let me just write him a letter, because that was what was going to be the fastest thing. And I never really like write patients letters at all. I don't even know if that's considered to be professional or not, but whatever. That was the best I could do in that moment because of how busy everything was. And my senior doctor was talking to the patient, so I couldn't like interrupt and say like, hey, I need to talk to the patient. And my senior doctor was going to leave with me to go to the next patient. So I had like maybe 2 minutes to speak to this patient and I couldn't speak to him. Anyway, so I ended up writing a letter. So I wrote a letter and I just I asked God to just help me to know what to say. And I just wrote about like God having a beautiful future for him and him being faithful with whatever he might face, whether he's a Christian or not. I wanted him to know of God's love and of God's protection, and that God had such a beautiful plan for him, and that his life meant so much. And then at the end of the letter, I just wrote down some Bible verses, and I just briefly like told him what investigations we're going to do for him, and I just put the letter in his hand, and I said, "I'll come speak to you later." And the next day I didn't have time to come see him. It was too busy. And then it was a weekend. So I only came back to see him again on the Monday after this was the Thursday. It was like a long time after I had initially seen him. And he um when he saw me again, he was like, you don't understand how much I've been searching for you. I have been meaning to talk to you. I've been asking all the doctors around here if they know you because I really need to speak to you. And I sat down and I'm like, well, I'm here. And he like introduced himself and we became acquainted slightly. And um, what he shared with me is that he is a Christian, and he had been going through a lot of spiritual warfare. He is part of a church, not an Adventist church, some evangelical church. And he had been going through a lot of spiritual warfare, a lot of attacks, a lot of, Satan doesn't what his interpretation was that Satan doesn't want this new church that he's a part of, like starting up and getting going. He doesn't want this church to go well, and that him and his family have been facing a lot of attacks, and that he believed that his health was also under attack, especially. And he was at the airport. He works for a cardiologist, and he was at the airport, and he felt this very tight chest pain running to his jaw and arm and whatever. Classic of heart attack, obviously. And he fell and he fainted. And then he had this when he explained it like he had this blackness, this darkness come over him and this like sinking feeling, which is classic for people who have a heart attack. And he, what the part that isn't classic and the part that he felt like was very spiritual was that he felt someone push him out of this darkness, like literally like push him on his back, push him out of this darkness into light. And he woke up and the pain was gone and everything was gone. And then he was rushed to the hospital and whatever. And then he was so confused about this experience. And he had been lately, he also went through some compromises where things that he knew was right, he was struggling to do. And he had a very severe battle that was going on in his mind if God even had a purpose for him. So whatever, sorry, I'm showing a lot of detail. But he shared with me that he was wondering whether what he was going through was God saving him from death or not. And if God really had a purpose for him. And what had been going on in his life with his life like falling apart and his kids' health and his wife's health and their finances and whatever. And basically, like everything I shared with him in the letter was like, he said it was God speaking to him. It addressed the point that God had as a purpose for him, which he had been worrying about. And I mean, I didn't know I didn't even know if he was a Christian. I really did not know. I just asked for God's guidance in terms of like what to say. It was not because of me at all. I was just an instrument. But it addressed the spiritual warfare, which in his mind was what was going on with his health and his wife's health and his children and their finances and the church and all these severe problems that they've been having in their family. Um, and it also confirmed to him that what had happened to him was, Satan's attack on his health and God saving him from that. And he also said that the verses that I wrote down was exactly the Bible verses that had come to his mind in the past 2 weeks, where he had like these long sessions of prayer and he would like battle in prayer with God. And these verses were the things that came to his mind. And I wrote down these exact verses on this piece of paper. And he just said, and he was crying when he was sharing all this with me. And he just said that you will never understand how much God used you. And yeah, this man has invited me and my husband to his church, and he wants to remain friends. And he doesn't even know that we're Adventists. And I will choose the right time if God impresses it on our hearts to like share the gospel in that way with him, share the 300 messages, share those things with him. But it's just this unbelievable um opening that I have with this man that I would not have had if I did not follow what God is asking me to do. And I would just have like my husband and I just have like this immediate in of like evangelizing to him, because he will listen to everything that I say because he believes that I am connected with God because of how God, in his words, was able to use me to speak to him. And this is not in any way to blow my own trumpet or to brag or anything, because none of this was done out of my own knowing at all. God is impressing me to know what to say. But what I want to illustrate is how amazing it is to be used by God in these ways. And I would not have met this man. It's almost irrelevant that I'm a doctor, because I would not have met him if I wasn't working in that hospital. None of what I did was medically really related. It was just acting out of a place of obedience to what God was asking me to do. And, I was, to be honest, contemplating not doing it because I was so busy that morning. And also, I was so afraid that maybe he is actually a Hindu and I'm misunderstanding the Lord and that this is actually going to kind of backfire to me and that, he doesn't really want me to share because he's an Indian man. So a lot of them most of them are Hindus and they do not like it when Christians share the Bible with them. So yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful story. And obviously when he was sharing it with me and I was just crying because it was just like so amazing to be used by God so significantly in someone's life. And this is just one man. And oftentimes we will not even hear the feedback of people that we have helped in the past. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have to share. I am going to leave it open. If anyone has any questions, if anyone has any comments, I will answer if I can. But yeah, does anyone have any questions?
Mine is not a question. It's just a acknowledgement. We have met by the University of Pretoria. I don't think you remember me, but I once rotated with you in under the test firm by UP.
Oh,
Thank you
in
so
internal
much for the
medicine.
lesson. Yeah, yeah, internal medicine.
Oh, wow. Hi, lovely to see you. I'll hear you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the lecture. Then I really appreciate it, and it's so good to hear from someone that I really knew that you're an Adventist back
Really.
that time.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate
Thank you
that.
so
Does anyone else have any
Um,
questions or comments?
okay.
Malcolm. You've unmuted, but we
I
can't
would
hear you.
like to. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to take you back probably to your student years.
sure.
So with how busy you would be, how would you balance studying for school and keeping up with your devotions? Yeah, I'm really interested in that part. How
Okay.
did you balance that? Making sure that, you get enough time for devotions, enough time for prayer, enough time for, serving at church, and also, being diligent.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. For me, to be honest, it was quite challenging. If what you mean by devotions is no like extra studies, it's just like uh spending time with God in the morning. Is that what you mean by devotions, or do you mean like extra studies as well? Like you're also studying Ministry of Healing on the side in addition to that, or do you just mean like morning by devotions, studying with like time with God and prayer?
Okay. More specifically, the morning devotions,
Okay.
because I find them to be very important. But also, you can also get into the extra work. How we find time for a ministry of healing to consistently go through it. And you're doing surgery, you're doing anesthesia, you're doing OBGYN, but at the same time, you also have this other curricula from church.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, devotions in the morning, for me, the best way that I was able to maintain that was just to have a routine. To me, like you have to eat every day, and spiritually, we also have to have devotions every day. And I would just make it a routine. It would be the first thing that I do when I wake up in the morning. Obviously, I probably go wash my face, go to the bathroom, whatever. But before I eat, before I go to university, before I look at my phone, before I do anything else, that was what I had to do. And it just became a routine. It just became like the next step in the morning when you wake up. Um, Initially, it was difficult to do that, but once it becomes that routine, it's like you just don't break that. And to be honest, what I saw when I did that was that my whole day would be more effective. Definitely way more effective. My whole day would go better if I had good devotions in the mornings. Whenever I would try to skimp on my devotions or I skipped it or whatever, my whole day would literally not go as well. Things would go wrong. It would take me longer to study. It's almost like God's blessing was not on my day. And it's because He wants me to spend time with Him. And it's because I gain a lot from spending time with Him. So I really want to urge everyone listening to do that. It is by far the best thing that you can do for your day. It's the building block, it's the structure, it's going to be the thing that keeps your entire day together. We as students and as doctors, I remember me as a student always wanting to find the most effective way to do things. And there is nothing more effective that you can do for your day or that can make your day more effective than spending time with the Lord. Literally nothing. It literally, yeah, it's like God is just guiding you in every single way just for your day to go as well as it can. You will still have um, backlash from the enemy. You will still have trials. You will still have challenges, but you will be able to handle them better because you will still have these challenges and things going on when you don't do devotions as well. But you just won't have that power. You won't have that peace. You won't have that perseverance. It is by far the best thing that you can do. It will be challenging sometimes, and sometimes you might be asked to study less, especially when you have like tests in the morning or tests that day and you have a lot to do. Sometimes you might be um, tempted to skip them and to be able to study more. But I just want to emphasize the very same thing. God is when you think about the story like I told about the anesthesiology test, I only studied for that thing for 3 hours and I got a distinction. I got one of the highest marks in the entire class. Other people studied for months for this test. I studied for hours for this test. And the reason I did well was because God was literally guiding me on what exact topics to study. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without him. There was no way I would have been able to reach that same thing without him. If I was in the same situation, but I decided to skip my devotions that morning, I would have failed so badly. And it's because God wants to guide us, but he can only do that if we give him the time to do that. So that's the one part of your question on devotions. The second part of your question on having like your other church obligations and having sorry, having like for example being youth leader or being a deacon at church or being involved with some of the ministries at church and whatever. That's a bit of a more difficult one for me to answer. In my earlier years of studying, I was very, very involved in church. I would urge everyone to be involved to a certain degree, but I did find it easier in my later studies to have a little bit more or less of an involvement in church. Not that I wasn't involved at all, but I didn't take on roles that required too much and that required too much time of me. We need to remember also, like when we are studying medicine, um, my husband always says that it's a particular time in your life where you kind of have to cut down on other things because the end goal that you're trying to reach is ministry. The end goal that you're trying to reach is working for the Lord. And while we're in the hostels, we minister. While we're in the hostels, we're working for the Lord. Just because we're not as involved in church as we were before, if that's the case for you, if you see the need to kind of cut down a little bit, that's okay. But the whole nature of our work is ministry. And I mean, I had people from church ask me, why am I not so involved anymore? And to them, it might look like we're not as involved. But if you are taking your commission seriously, what you do in church, what you do at the hostels and in your work is also ministry. But you need to be careful because in the same sentence, I also want to say that if we are involved not only in the hostels, but outside of the hostels, involved in mission work or ministry somehow, it also keeps us serious because we are in the secular environment in the hospitals. It is very easy for us to become kind of swept up with the way the hostels are doing things, the way the secular universities are doing things. And we don't always keep our connection, we don't always keep our seriousness with God the way we should. So it is important to still stay connected somewhat and to still have a role in church. So what I did is instead of having like 3 or 4 different positions and roles and involvements in church, I cut it down to like one, where I was still involved, it was still keeping me connected, it was still giving me that like mission outlet and that involvement, that ministry I was taking part in. But it did free up my time quite a bit more to study more, not only university work, but also what God is requiring of me. And then the other part of your question, you were asking a little bit about like reading other things, like educating ourselves on what Ellen White wrote about doctors, about medical ministry, medical missionaries, health message, all these other things that also relate to what we are doing. If I wasn't like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend to everyone what I did, in terms of like not studying your medical studies and just studying what Ellen White is writing to us. It is also important that we do learn what we are there to learn. We need to get the degree, we need to have the information, and I don't think that we need to be negligent, and I don't think we should not study what is given to us to study. But I do think that we need to be quite serious with our time. I think that we can all do a little bit of introspection about how much of other things we are letting into our lives. You know, are we wasting time on media? Are we spending time on other things like entertainment, for example, that doesn't necessarily have that big of a goal and a function? It's just there for entertainment. I'm not saying that resting and free time is not a good thing to have and hobbies is not a good thing to have, but are there maybe some areas in our life where we could replace something that we are doing that is not actively benefiting us and is not actively benefiting God's work? Maybe with like, instead of doing that for 2 hours a day or an hour a day, to go read one of these books and go study one of these topics that God is pressing on our hearts to study. Something I've also recently started doing, not recently, but something I also started doing throughout my medical studies was just just make it a habit that about an hour before bed, I read something that is actively going to help me in my studies, but like from a spiritual point of view, like Ministry of Healing, for example. So then I kind of transitioned into not just having morning devotions, but also having quote unquote like evening devotions, but not as involved as morning devotions, where I would just kind of relaxingly, calmly read Ministry of Healing. And it's not like at all as mentally engaging as studying. It is relaxing. Instead of like reading a secular book, to read Ministry of Healing. Instead of like watching a movie or watching YouTube, to read Ministry of Healing in that like evening hour. And that like really built up. God really blessed that time. It really, really built up into like a large amount of content that I was able to ingest day after day, staying faithful, just giving that. And it doesn't have to be a whole hour, it could be half an hour, it could be less time. But I think that it is important that because we have so much we want to fit into our day. And I think the best advice I can give is to do it effectively. And the best advice I can give to how to do things effectively is to bring God into every decision that you're making. He wants us to know all of this. He wants us to be clinically excellent. He wants us to have the knowledge medically that we need to have. But he also wants us to have the knowledge that he gave the prophet for us to have. He wants us to have the Bible's knowledge. He wants us to have all this knowledge that he has given us. And the only way that we can fit these things in effectively is if he is the one that guides us, not our own desires, not entertainment, not all these other things. So it might seem like a lot, and it might seem like a difficult thing for us to achieve by ourselves. But God really, really wants to help us. He really wants to guide us. And that is by far, nothing can make your day more effective than God being like in charge and guiding every single second. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you so much. Guys, is there anyone else with a question? Okay, it seems there's an answer. I'll ask one more. I don't know if you still have time.
Sure, no, definitely.
Okay, so probably from the perspective of what we're trying to do here, we're trying to form an association, Adventist students trying to just help each other whilst we're students, because it's a difficult journey, and along the way, there's a tendency that a lot of us will fall out. I don't know if you had that during the time you're students, maybe if you had friends from church whom you're studying together with, who would also encourage you or something like that. So I don't know if you had that. If you did, maybe can share a bit into that experience and also maybe what you can advise or encourage us with.
Sorry, do you mind just like repeating the question? I'm not completely sure what you're asking. Do you mind just like rephrasing it a little bit? Sorry, thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, basically I'm asking, so um, So right here, right, we formed this association for specifically for Adventist medical students. So that yes, while we're studying, but we tried to create an environment where we also foster spirituality and trying to put that medical missionary mindset in each other to share content, how we're going to do it, to try and learn these things together. So I want to ask, did you have that during school, even now as well? And if you did, what was your experience like? What would you guys do? Something like that.
I hear what you're saying. Okay, I got you. So, no, we didn't have anything like this. Um, to be honest, I felt very alone in my studies. I have a lot of Adventist friends that are also in the medical field and are either doctors or are studying to be doctors, and we're also studying to be doctors at the same time. Actually, like in my medical studies, I had two other Adventists in my year at the same university. Um, but we didn't have any association like this. And I, to be honest, also felt quite alone because I didn't feel like there were a lot of people who had the same views as I did. Um, I oftentimes felt like I was taking like what Ellen White said and God's commission for us as doctors, that like I was taking it way more seriously than they were. And I was doubting myself often that maybe I was like just taking it too seriously. And it was difficult for me um, until I found mentors and other people that were like-minded, that also believed the same way that I did. But it was quite challenging, and I think that you guys are very, very blessed to have this. Very blessed. I think that this is amazing. I think having this community and having the type of talks that you guys are having are absolutely amazing, and I wish that we had that. I think this is brilliant. Um, but I think, yeah, my advice would be um, there will definitely be people who fall out. There will definitely be people who get quote unquote swallowed in by the system, swallowed up by the system, um, who will not necessarily continue to believe what you guys are believing and who might not take this type of stuff seriously for the rest of your lives. It's almost a guarantee that there will be people who fall out. I think the best thing that I can suggest would just be to like continue doing what you're doing as much as you guys can, and to pray for everyone and you yourselves to surround yourselves with people who are truly like-minded. People might be a part of this association who do not necessarily want to stay apart or who do not maybe not take it as seriously as you guys, but to have people who you know for a fact take it as seriously as you or more seriously and surround yourself with those types of people, that is what's going to keep you yourself serious. And unfortunately, because I didn't have or was not a part of an association like this myself, I don't have a lot of advice to give. But in terms of like staying strong in the faith and as a doctor, to try and stay serious in terms of like what God is asking of you, not what the world is asking of you, is to surround yourself with people who are as serious and especially and preferably more serious than you are, because they're going to keep you on your toes. They're going to keep you right. Have mentors that check on you, have mentors that, maybe are a lot more experienced than you, not only medically, like career-wise, but also spiritually, who can teach you things and who can guide you as you learn them for yourself. And that is, I think to me, is like the most precious thing because it is difficult. We are in a secular environment. We are in a place where, um, unfortunately, the world is in charge of teaching us medicine. And we have to ingest the good and throw the bad away. Sometimes it's difficult for us to understand what is the bad parts of this, what is parts of this that God might not agree with, and that we need to kind of understand what is bad for us. It's difficult when we don't have someone to actually guide us and teach us like that. So to have mentors, to think objectively, and also just to fill our own minds with as much of God's word as possible, that's going to be the best thing for us. But yeah, sorry, I don't have like much more advice to give because yeah, we didn't have this. I wish I did. But yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. Um, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing. Looking forward to chatting another time.
I'm sure you highlighted that probably have something to share about the history of the Adventist Health Message and how it was started. So praying that the Lord will open the opportunity to have a share about that which God will do for many of us. So maybe you can just give closing remarks and then I'll ask Robin to pray for us after you're done with the remarks.
Sorry, I struggled a little bit to hear you. If you were asking me something directly, do you mind just repeating that? But if not, it's fine. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Was I clear enough, speaking?
Sorry, no, we unfortunately, well, I at least didn't hear at all.
Okay. Okay. So I was saying, thank you for sharing, and looking forward to, having another time. I was highlighting that I recall that you said you would like to share something that you've learned over the years, or recently about, the Adventist healthcare message and how it all began, and its impact in our time now. So I was saying, looking forward to having another time to have that session as the Lord allows. So I was saying, maybe you can just give a closing remark, and then I would ask one of the participants, Ruimbo, to pray after you're done.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Yeah, no, I would love to share something that not now, but on a future occasion. Basically the history of the health work, which is basically like with the 1844 and what happened with the church, the history of the church, and not the history of the church, but how the medical work tied in with that. And what was expected of doctors in the history of the church, and how that actually directly translates to what is expected of us as doctors today. And that was very eye-opening to me when I learned that. It's not something that it was ever taught to me. I mean, I was born and raised as an Adventist, but I had never learned this. And it was very eye-opening to me because it's very different to what is expected of us um, as doctors from the world's perspective today. And I wish I knew that earlier. I think I might have made some different decisions, and it was really mind blowing. So I would really like to share that, but that will happen on a different occasion. So yeah, just a closing remark. I just want to urge everyone to stay serious. I'll send my slides to Malcolm, and then you guys are welcome to go through that. If there's any questions, Malcolm does have my number. I'm very willing to answer questions and to help people out. If anyone wants or needs anything, I'm very open and willing to do that. I do take quite some time to get back to people. I'm quite busy, unfortunately, but I am willing to do that. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoyed this, and I'm really hoping this could help someone. It is really a privilege to evangelize the way that we can. We have so many opportunities that we would never otherwise have had. We have immediate influence with people. People immediately trust us because we're medical students, we're doctors, and it's just the most amazing opportunity to use for good. And I pray that everyone really realizes how much influence we have and to use it for God's kingdom. That's my prayer. Thank you, everyone, for having me.
Thank you so much. Okay, shall we pray? To our kind and loving Heavenly Father, we come before your throne of grace and mercy, thanking you for this opportunity that you've given unto us to learn more of what you are expecting from us. Help us, Almighty Father, to be diligent in the work that you've given unto us, and to be eager to know more, and help us, and may you guide us with your Holy Spirit for us to be able to put into practice everything that we are learning. May you give us, Almighty Father, help us to stand strong, and also help us to encourage one another and to keep one another. We thank you for this association that has been created for our good. Help us to be one another's keepers. And may you be with us as this week is starting. May we remember that you are our guide, you are our protector, and may we be eager to talk to you and to tell you about each and everything that we go through. I pray in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
Thanks so much, guys. is where we are today. Have a good day.